Whether we are there or not, ITSPmagazine still gets the best stories. Plenty of conferences and events spark our curiosity and allow us to start conversations with some of the world's brightest minds. In person or virtually, Sean Martin and Marco Ciappelli go on location and sit down with them at the intersection of technology, cybersecurity, and society. Together, we discover what the synergy of these three elements means for the future of humanity. At Level Blue, we simplify securing your most valuable business assets by providing broad cybersecurity experience and award-winning services. Level Blue manages the risk. You reap the reward. Learn more at levelblue.com. Coro, the leading cybersecurity platform purpose-built for small and medium-sized enterprises, protects against malware, ransomware, phishing, data leakage, network threats, insider threats, and email threats across devices, users, networks, and cloud applications. Learn more at coro.net.
Marco.
Sean.
How you doing?
Vroom, vroom.
Vroom, vroom, vroom. 3 times better.
Shots on the road.
Are you doing better than yesterday?
Define better. How do I measure that?
I don't know. You have to
How
tell
do
me.
I measure my success? And what is success? Let's get philosophical right away.
That's right. Right off the bat.
Let's present this. So
I think you're not doing better.
I am. Thank you. I appreciate your friendship so much.
I want you to do better. How's that?
Okay, that's a good push. It's a stimulus to do better. But I need to know how I measure again. How, and what does be doing better means. So before we get into this intricate conversation, which I'm sure our guest is going to make it a little bit more easy to understand, I would say that this is a Chats on the Road, is a pre-event for the coverage that we're going to have ITSP Magazine, also on location with Sean and Marco at Black Hat. I like to remember again, this is the 10th year that we cover as official press. And it's also ITSP Magazine's birthday, so yay for
great.
that.
Congratulations.
Happy birthday to somebody behind the curtain. Well, let's get into this chat. This topic caught my attention, and Jason seemed really cool, and I was like, let's do this. Let's figure out what's going on with some of the research. Jason Healey's with us, senior research scholar at Columbia University. How are you, Jason?
Having a fantastic day. Thanks. Looking forward to Black Hat and celebrating your birthday.
Great. We're all going to wear black.
You're very precocious 10-year-olds, I gotta say. You can do so much at that age.
We were already there when we were.
We don't know what we know. We think we know it all.
Well, what I do know is that I love this topic, so I want to dive right into it.
Yeah, let's do that. So, if there's anything from, I'm certain there is, from the work you've done leading up to your talk, maybe share a few words on that to help people kind of get a picture of who Jason is and how this all came together.
Yeah, thanks. So I made my way in, like many folks, from the military. Was in the Air Force, got very early start in the field, and back in 1998. Well, relatively early start in the field, where I, as a relatively young officer at the Pentagon, got to help set up the military's first military cyber command. It was the Joint Task Force Computer Network Defense. There were 25, 30 of us that started out, went on to be Cyber Command today. And I left there to join Phil Venable, now at Google Cloud. Then he was at Goldman Sachs. And it was great to work both Department of Defense wide and then working for such a visionary like Phil, because they had this big picture of, okay, what's happening not just at our own individual firm, but how does that fit into the larger mix of what's happening across the entire internet, across cyberspace as a whole. So when a couple years ago, I made my way from being a practitioner, I also did two stints at the White House, into academia in research. I'd always been haunted by those topics of saying, well, wait a minute, how are we doing? Right? We're putting in all of these, all of these investments, right? Hundreds of billions of dollars. We're doing all of these patents we're working so hard, right? All these events that hit on Fridays, all these missed kids' birthdays, all these worked weekends and holidays. And are we actually making a dent in the problem? Not at the level of individual CISO and enterprise, although of course that's super important, but at the level of the internet as a whole. And what really hit me, I was doing research for a book that was the first military history of cyberspace. It's called The Fierce Domain. Kind of like, of who's been doing what to whom in the national security space. And I found these quotes that said, the red team always gets through, essentially. And we're going to hear that again at things like that at Black Hat. We hear it at DEF CON and RSA basically every year. That quote goes back to 1972. And if you think about it, it's not just about what the red team can do. It's saying when the attackers are disciplined and know what they want, they're going to get what they want. In some sense, it's a sense of saying offense has these advantages, right? That in general, we need a varsity defense to go against junior varsity attackers. And if they're coming at us with their best team, then man, we need to have all-stars. And so, boy, it's been over 50 years since we came up with that. So my talk for Black Hat, and I've been on this topic for maybe 10 years or so, was to dive in and say, all right, how will we know if defense is winning? If we're not just improving year on year, and this is something I picked up from Dan Gear, right? He said every year, we on the defense, we're having personal records. We get to look back and say, we are doing better this year than we were last year. But he said every year, the attackers are building up world records, right? So they're improving faster than we're improving. So how can we measure that? How do we get into this to really try and assess whether or not we're making relative gains against the threat actors?
Boy, I'm thinking a city, a middle-aged city, medieval with the walls, and go way back than 50 years. I'm going to go back 2,000 years plus. And probably the attacker's always been winning. It's more like the measure of what is winning and how you balance the winning, the defense with living your life. Are you just going to be cupped inside the wall the whole time? So, where the balance strike in society?
It's a definition of winning, right?
Yeah,
they might have a success, but is that winning?
Right. And in almost every kind of military conflict, you see this go back and forth, except maybe nukes, right? In nukes, the attacker, there's not that many defenses that you can put up against a nuke, and they're relatively easy to beat. But in most other areas, you see this back and forth, right? In the American Civil War, and especially in World War I, right? It was elan and spirit and good. We can charge, and it's going to be, the spirit of the bayonet, or it's going to be the spirit of the opposing side that's going to decide who wins. It was certainly the French position, and it didn't do well facing machine guns. Or in the American Civil War, where massed rifle fire was actually pretty darn effective. So you've seen this go back and forth, and certainly in our field, right, the offense doesn't predominate, right? It doesn't have supremacy, right? Defense certainly has great chances, as we see again and again and again, of all the companies that aren't getting hacked. But there has been these, we never invented the internet to be secure, right? We focused on other things. We roll out software again and again and again that has the, we rush to market and add in security afterwards. By the way, that's another thing that goes back to 1972. Quotes that say you can't add security by retrofit, it must be done by design. We have known that for 50 years. Common mode vulnerabilities, like we saw with the recent CrowdStrike failure, right? That so many of us are relying on the same systems that have the same vulnerability, can go wrong at the same time, right? That doesn't mean that offense is dominant or is going to win every time, but at the least at the level of the overall system, it generally means that the playing field is tilted to their advantage. to go back, Marco, to your example, right? They're in the uphill position with the sun at their back, right? It's just a little bit more difficult for us to try stuff. And this really plays out in the new I guess it's not new anymore, the White House National Cybersecurity Strategy, where they say in the very beginning, right, we've got to have a more defensible cyberspace. We've got to flip this around so that we don't end up having national security level incidents just because somebody clicked on a link. And I'm happy to say I did help draft that strategy. And that section, that talk about the more defensible internet, about shifting, about having more leverage, right? Where can we do the smallest turn of the screwdriver that's going to have the biggest impact and the greatest gains for the defense over the attackers at the largest scale and least cost? That came from our work at Columbia University with our New York Cyber Task Force over the last 8 years or so.
So many questions on this.
Right.
I guess before we started recording, we talked about the individual. So there's a CISO in their program and a business, and there's an industry where a collective of them might share information and become a little stronger or better than other industries. But then there's the broader, all of us together.
Yeah.
And I guess to your point, that's the view we need to gain on how well are we doing, right?
Well, we need to do better on all of them, right? It's difficult enough for CISOs to understand which of their controls are effective, or if I buy this tool, what's it going to mean for my ROI? So I don't mean to say that my work is any sense more important than that. But the bulk of metrics.
My question is, do we need the individual, the industry, the type of system? Do we need different types of views to achieve what you are looking to do?
Yeah, without a doubt. And so what's been difficult is we've been going through, like if we look at the metrics and we see all of these different metrics, and it's hard to know what to make of them, right? We see Scattered Spider has been changing their TTPs really frequently, and so this is a really bad thing. Or we see that Scattered Spider is able to use relatively easy TTPs to get in, right? They're just able to use valid credentials. Well, and that's a bad thing. Well, so here we're looking at two things. They use something really easy or they use something really hard. And in both cases, we say it's a bad sign for us. Well, I doubt that's true. So we need this framework of saying, all right, if we're really succeeding in minimizing threat, minimizing vulnerability, minimizing impact, what are our propositions about what success is going to look like in those? And once we have that, then we can then go to the people that are parting the metrics and we can do a better job of saying, all right, can you give us that in a time series? Like, here are metrics that are good for the CISO. Here are metrics that help us understand the system as a whole. And I'll give you one of the classic ones. To me, it's the only metric that we've really been reporting for a long time that tells us the system as a whole. It's mean time to detect. Verizon Data Breach Investigation Report, back to the Wade Baker days, has been talking about that. And it's shown the substantial shift over the 15 years they've been doing that report, that we've been detecting faster and faster. Adversaries have had a harder time staying hidden across the tens of thousands of incidents that Verizon has looked at across time. Now, maybe that was because of ransomware. It wants to get detected early so that you have to pay. We recently, some reporting from SecureWorks and from Mandiant has shown, even if you're subtracting out ransomware, we've been detecting faster. And I love that metric because it's directly measuring how well threat actors can hide and defenders can catch them. And we've seen this great improvement. So that's why I love these kind of statistics that we've got to pull out and really say, good, this helps us understand these system-wide dynamics.
Yeah, this connect to a pre-event conversation, Sean, that we just had with the other presentation, which is
Fred
Heinlein, Fred, which is still a research, and they're like doing a grading system. Where they look at the nation state defense and cybersecurity level, and it include China, it include United States and many other countries.
Oh, is this the cyber strategy talk?
Yeah.
Yep.
And And what I liked a lot about that was that he used a lot the word relative.
Mm-hmm.
So it's all relative to the security of others, because it's not a confined environment. And I feel like what you're going here with winning relative to what,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
I mean, that's from a philosophical perspective is how we need to look at this. So if you have a frame, a list is not that one by one you can follow the little point and check, and then you're like, yeah, I'm good. No, well, you're good until now. Maybe you're better, but you're not necessarily, it's a relative winning. That's
absolutely, because defense is never going to win.
No, exactly.
Right? And it's the American military view, right? I mean, there's a fight going on in Europe again or wherever, and we're going to send the GIs over and we're going to save the day, and then we're going to bring our troops back because we won, right? This is not going to be that kind of fight. But is defense winning? Sounds a lot better. Is defense doing better relative to attackers over a long period of time? Isn't quite as pithy. But you get to, but it's the right point. And so I mentioned this scattered spider example of how we looked at these different areas. So what I'm going to go through in the talk is saying, all right, if we as defenders are doing better disrupting threat actors, what would we expect to see? Right? We would expect the threat actors to no longer be able to use the easiest TTPs. Right? They shouldn't be able to just log in using valid credentials. We need to force them to do the more difficult TTPs. So in that sense, Scattered Spider switching their TTPs is actually probably a sign of success. We would expect to see them burn through vulnerabilities as we get better at patching them. We'd expect them to use more, so we'd expect a more rapid turnover of vulnerabilities, and a decreased average age of vulnerabilities used in successful exploits. We'd expect to see things like maybe we see more 0 days and a higher price for 0 days, right? Just think of how often we come out and we report all these years, hey, we've seen more 0 days. But we've never had the context to say, well, does that mean we're doing better? Or does that mean we're doing worse? I would propose if you see these other things that are also happening, it probably means we're doing better.
It's interesting pulling all the context together to have a view of really what's going on, and not just looking at each one and trying to guess what signal it's telling you. Yeah. The other thing, you mentioned impact as well. Mm-hmm. And the other thing that comes to mind is kind of the economics of all of this. Right. Because ultimately, unless we're talking about human life, which is a loss, if actually we lose a life. But otherwise, it kind of boils back down to money. How much are we spending compared to how much are we saving or preserving on the other side? And how much, to your point, on if we're making things more difficult, if they're spending more for 0 days on the bad actor side, or it's taking them longer and more investment to research to find things to use. Mm-hmm. Those kind of start to weigh out. So are you thinking about this in the context of economics as well, or purely time series based?
Well, certainly we can look at the time series based for the economic cost, right? I don't love some of those because the numbers aren't necessarily. There's a lot of low quality stats out there as we try and make these guesses. But we can look at the number of insurance claim, the amount of insurance claim. There's been good research that just has come out in the last year on catastrophic insurance losses. That is single incidents over 800 million, which has actually decreased pretty substantially. But it's not only economic, right? We can look at, we started counting, for example, how often does a cyber incident cause a U.S. state or a region overseas of the United States to declare an emergency? Right? Colonial Pipeline had 18 separate states of emergency declared for it, which is a good indication of how bad something was that a governor had to step up and say, yeah, this is an emergency. For Change Healthcare and the National Security Council, their deputies committee met like every day for almost 2 weeks. So even separate from the economic, which has the counting problems with it, there's these other indicators that we might be able to use to pull in and say, yep, we've got these other ways to measure impact other than just the pure dollar cost or yen cost or pound cost or euro cost, which can be tricky sometimes.
Well, there is also the fact that the breach and the way that we're forced to use the internet as an individual, the privacy consequences of that. Because it's easy and it's very common to say, all right, how much is costing? But the individual or the school that get attacked constantly, that there is an entire other cost. There is aspect of, is the protection democratic? Meaning, is it for everybody or just for the large company that can afford to have large defenses? So, and it's a good start.
And that's one of the things that we're just not in the research, I think, going to have fully baked for Black Hat. But certainly we want to look at, for example, like so much of the focus of governments is on critical infrastructure and systemically important entities. And we understand why. Because they can have cascading failures, Colonial Pipeline, SolarWinds, CrowdStrike. But we also want to look at, for example, the most at-risk populations who are already suffering and might not have the connectivity that they need. And then they have, this kind of stuff happen on top. There are some good lessons that we can take from the pandemic on this that focused on this with COVID-19, including work particularly from Josh Corman and others on the excess mortality. And certainly we're going to see, they've already started to find some indications of excess mortality. That is, it's tough to pin ransomware attacks on hospitals to say, yes, this particular person died because of it and that particular person. But you can see statistically, we had more deaths in the US and European and other health systems during and after these ransomware events.
Yeah, super interesting. And it makes me want to look up, I don't know how many years ago, it was a big thing to report on how many SMBs, small, medium businesses, went out of business after an attack.
Right. That's
wonder where that number is going.
Yeah, that'd be great to find. That's exactly the kind of stuff, because sometimes those can be easier to find. There's been also some good work from some Fed and former Fed economists on what happens at the level of states. So there's a lot of good material out there, more than I can certainly capture with my research team. That is why we're hoping to encourage those that have this data to keep going with it, to identify those that are specifically to help us understand the system level, and really to present that in a time series. There's such good material. Like Veracode has such amazing material on the software development lifecycle, but they don't present all of it in a time series. So what we're hoping is that by having this as a framework or a catalog, right, it's never going to be as developed as Attack or these others, right? It's not going to be, include everything that could possibly be out there, but at least we've got a basic framework so that you can report these in. And then maybe, fingers crossed, we could do an annual report that traces year by year, even quarter by quarter, how we're doing on these top level system-wide statistics of is defense winning.
You know what I like about that is the fact that instead of a yearly report of how bad we're doing, this is the top 10 threats, top 10 attack. Actually, something that gives us a little bit of optimism moving forward. I like that.
And there are, right? The mean time to detect is, to me, one of the great ones. But this material from Veracode, right? They show out of software with an open source library that scanned the first time, we've seen like a 30% improvement of no known vulnerabilities, right? That's what secure by design looks like. Yep. Software scan the first time, open source libraries, no known vulnerabilities. That's secure by design. Then we've got another statistic on that looks at out of all of the total software that Veracode scans, which is a lot of software, how much of that has a critical vulnerability. That's also improved by about 30%. Now that's only Veracode. So for us to really, we've got a selection bias. So we do want, as we do this over time, to be able to find other sources for that kind of information. But we're not going to have any time for our Black Hat talk.
But there is time to share what you do have. And
Exactly so.
I'll be joining that chat Wednesday,
Oh,
August 7th, 4:20 in Oceanside A. And yeah, I'm excited to see the presentation and some insights into the framework and how you plan to take this. And hopefully people get involved and get engaged.
Great.
Clearly we need the data. So
great, thanks. And I'd mentioned some of the folks that inspired me, like working with Dan Gear over the years, who's really had this. I really had my eyes open on working with Phil Venables, and I'm happy to say that Phil is continuing to support this work at at Google Cloud as one of our sponsors for doing this work.
Nice. I think Dan was a keynote, if I'm not mistaken, a few years back.
Great.
But, yeah, great conversation from him. Yeah. Super smart dude, of course. All right. Well, Jason, pleasure to have you on the show, and looking forward to seeing you in Vegas on Wednesday, August 7th. And for everybody listening, hopefully you found a few good nuggets in this chat, and we'll go connect with Jason in Las Vegas for his session, which is entitled, Is Defense Winning? And take your own definition of that and have a chat with Jason and other people sitting in the room there. And please do stay tuned. We have much more coming to you from Black Hat before, during, and after the event. And yep, I'm feeling good. Thanks a lot for this chat. Thanks, Jason.
Hey, thanks, Sean. Thanks, Marco.
Thank you.
SquareX helps organizations detect, mitigate, and threat hunt web attacks happening against their users in real time. With its innovative browser-native security product, SquareX safeguards enterprise users from a spectrum of web-based threats, encompassing malicious files, websites, scripts, and compromised networks. Learn more at sqrx.com. Coro, the leading cybersecurity platform purpose-built for small and medium-sized enterprises, protects against malware, ransomware, phishing, data leakage, network threats, insider threats, and email threats across devices, users, networks, and cloud applications. Learn more at coro.net. At Level Blue, we simplify securing your most valuable business assets by providing broad cybersecurity experience and award-winning services. Level Blue manages the risk. You reap the reward. Learn more at levelblue.com.